Hey there, how's it going everybody? In this video, we're going to be doing something a little different from my normal tutorials. We're going to be seeing a real-world example of a problem that I solved using a Python script that saves me a bit of time and hassle. Now, I like showing these real-world examples because it takes a lot of the topics that I've done separate videos on and combines them all into a single script to accomplish something for me that's useful. So in this script, you'll see me using an automated web browser, dot files for secret credentials, logging, sending email and text notifications, and a few other things that we've learned separately in other videos. Now, unlike my other tutorials, I'm not going to go super in depth on every single step. That's what those individual videos on each of those topics is for. Instead, this is more about showing how to take a variety of different skills to accomplish a single goal. Also, this script is going to contain private information that's specific to myself, so you're not really going to be able to follow along by writing the code yourself, since I'm going to hide a lot of my private credentials. It's more meant to just show you how it's done rather than following along step by step in the code yourself. So with that said, let's discuss the problem that I'm trying to solve and see the solution that I came up with. So I'm the type of person that hates manually paying bills. I have just about every single bill set up to use autopay, and most companies these days offer that capability. But one of my local utilities doesn't have an autopay solution. So I have to remember to manually go into this site each month just to pay a single bill. So instead of doing this manually each month, I'm going to write a script that does this for me automatically. So it's going to go out to the local utilities website that I have pulled up here. It's going to fill in my account information, my last name, navigate through a few different pages, and finally submit the payment information. Now, I'm going to be keeping logs of the activities and send an email and a text message to myself each time that this script is run so that I know when the bill was paid and how much it was. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, we need to navigate a web browser using Python. So to do this, I'm going to be using Selenium. Now, Selenium allows us to navigate different browsers using Python and also has a headless mode that allows our script to navigate websites without actually opening a browser window for us visually. And since headless mode allows us to work within browsers without an actual window being open, that allows us to run this in the background or even where a GUI might not be available, like on a web server. So while I'm writing this script, I'm going to have Selenium actually opening my browser so that we can see what's going on and debug any problems. But once we're finished, I'm going to set this to headless mode so that it can do all of this in the background without opening any windows. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is install Selenium, and we can just do that with pip. So that's pip install, and this is Selenium. And now that we have Selenium installed, it needs to know how to work with our browser. So each browser is different, and also each browser has different versions that can change how Selenium needs to interact with it. So to do this, we're going to be installing a driver for the browser and version that I plan to use. So this will act as a bridge between Selenium and our web browser. So I'm going to be using Chrome on a Mac operating system. So I'm going to download the driver that works with my version of Chrome and my operating system. But if you're using a different browser or operating system, then you're going to need to do a web search to find the browser that, or the driver that is compatible with your setup. So for Chrome, we can grab the drivers at this website, and I already have it pulled up here. And like I said, I'll have links to all of these in the description section below. Now, on this page, right here at the top, it says if you're using Chrome version 115 or newer, then to go to this dashboard here. I'm using version 125 currently, and so I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And we can see here that at the top, it says that the latest stable version is 125.0, 642278. I just updated my Chrome, so that should be what mine is. So I'm going to click here that I want the latest stable one. And now we have the drivers here. Now, these are Chrome here. This is actually a browser to test with. We're going to want the Chrome drivers. Now, like I said, I am on a Mac, and I have the Apple Silicon chips. So I'm going to use the Mac ARM64 here. But if you have an Intel processor, you'll use x64 and things like that. So just be sure to get the browser and the operating system that you're using. So I'm going to copy that URL, and now I'm going to paste that in, and it should go ahead and do my download for me. We can see that that finished. I'm going to open this up. Now, I already have a project created here on my desktop. So I'm just going to unzip this, and then I will place this within my project directory. And let me go ahead and clean this up a bit. I'll go ahead and sort this by name. Now, these drivers you can have located anywhere that you'd like, but they're pretty lightweight. So I usually just put them within my project directory anytime I need a new one. So we can see here that it's in this Chrome driver Mac ARM64 folder. So I'm going to open this, and we can see the Chrome driver within here. Now on Mac, sometimes you can't run applications that you've downloaded online unless you give it explicit permission. Now there are a couple ways to do this, but one way is to just right click and go to Open with Terminal. And usually this works for me. When I do this, it says, are you sure that you want to open this? If I say open, then it will essentially give it the permissions that it needs. Now, I have forgot to do that step before, and like I said, if you're on a Mac, you'll likely run into permission issues whenever you go to execute your code. So if you are having permission issues, then that could be what it was. So now I'm going to close that down. Okay, and now I'm going to open up VS Code here, and now we should have everything that we need in place in order to automate our browser interactions. So let's test this by opening a website. So first we need to import Selenium, and specifically we're going to want to import WebDriver. So this is from Selenium, import WebDriver. And now we're going to connect Selenium to our driver. So I have the driver located in my project directory here. We can see on the far left what the directory structure looks like. Now I'm going to show you how to dynamically get this path location in order to tell Selenium where to find this WebDriver. So we're going to do this with the pathlib module. So I will say from pathlib import path. And sorry if you see these imports jumping around sometimes here. I have it set up to automatically sort these whenever I save it. And we're just getting some warnings here because I haven't used these imports yet. Now, I haven't done a tutorial on the pathlib module yet, but basically this is an object-oriented way of working with paths instead of using os.path like we've seen in previous tutorials. And I will have a video on pathlib coming out in the near future, so we can see how to work with this in more detail. But to give you a quick example of what we can do, we can get an absolute path to our project directory right from our script. So I will just call this script directory, and this is going to be equal to path, and we want the path of the current file. And then if we do a .resolve, then that will give us an absolute path to that file. And now we want the project directory. So now we have the absolute path of that file. To get the directory, I can just call its parent, and that will give me the project directory. And since we know that the driver is within that directory that we just saved a second ago, we can get that by saying driver path is equal to. Now, there are a couple ways we can do this. With the pathlib module, you can actually do this kind of syntax here where we do a /. So I could say script directory / Chrome driver Mac ARM64. And that kind of makes it look like how you would see it in, you know, a file system or something like that. I need to put this here within quotes. And we called this Chrome driver. So I can say Chrome driver. So that's one way to do it. Now, if you're just changing over to using pathlib, then you can still, you might be used to os.path.join. The pathlib module has something like that. We could simply just say script directory, and instead of join, we can say join path, and then pass in the directory, and then pass in the file name, and then I'll get rid of that on the end here. So whichever one you're most familiar with, I'll just go ahead and keep that as join path. And let me expand this out here a little bit to make sure that I got this right. Actually, I missed a / here, or just a regular /, sorry. So I'll add that in. And now let's test and make sure that we have all of our correct path locations here. So now to use this driver, we need to import this service object from Selenium. So to do this, I will come up here and say from Selenium dot WebDriver dot Chrome dot service import service. And now down here, we can simply say service is equal to, use that service object, and then pass in our driver path. And now to tie all this together, let's go ahead and create a driver that will navigate our browser. So I can say driver is equal to WebDriver.Chrome, and this is going to be service is equal to that service object that we just created. And now we have our WebDriver here. So let's navigate to a URL. So for now, let's just do something like Google. So I'll say https / www.google.com. And when we're done doing everything that we want to do with our driver, it's a good practice to always close this connection. So to do this, we can just say driver.quit and save that. So now to make sure that we have all of this correct so far, let's go ahead and run this and see if it navigates to google.com. So I'll go ahead and run this. Okay, it looks like we have an error here. If I scroll up, okay, so it looks like I made a typo here. This is Chrome driver. So let me save that and rerun it. And now we can see there that it opened up our web browser very quickly and then it closed it back down. And that's just because it didn't have anything to do. It opened up the website and then closed it immediately. Now, for debugging purposes, I'm going to want to keep the browser open so I can see what's going on and inspect some elements. So to do this, I'm going to add some Chrome options that will keep the browser open and also set a debug variable that we can change from true to false in order to switch back and forth between that debug mode. So let's clean up the code here a little bit and put all of this stuff together. And now below our imports here, I'll just say debugging is equal to true for now. And now I'm going to want to import those Chrome options. So to do this, I can say from Selenium, and I'm actually just going to copy and paste this here. So from selenium.webdriver.chrome.options, import options. So now, before we create our driver here, this is where I'm going to create some options. So I'll just say Chrome options is equal to options, and we won't add anything there just yet because I'm going to want to test if I am debugging. So I'll say if debugging, then I want to say Chrome options dot add underscore experimental underscore option, and then we're going to pass in detach, set this equal to true. Now, I know this might look a little bit weird here, but this is one way to keep your browser open if you're using Chrome. And I'm going to be using this because this is kind of the official way that I saw to do it online. But if you're using another browser and don't have that available, or you just want to keep it simple, then one thing that I've seen people use is simple input statements. So we could just say input and then say, press enter. And what that'll do is it'll just pause your script in a certain spot after your driver opens up a website, and then it'll keep your browser open for you. Okay, so if we are debugging, then this is what will keep our browser open. If we are not debugging, then I'm going to add some more options here. I'll say Chrome options dot add underscore argument, and we're going to add this argument of -- headless. Oh, and let me spell that correctly. And that will basically tell Chrome that we want to run this in headless mode like I was talking about before, where it doesn't open up a window at all. And now we need to actually pass in these options whenever we create our driver. And we can do that just by passing this in as an argument when we create that object. So I'll say options is equal to Chrome underscore options that we created there. And also, let's go ahead and check if we are debugging or not to determine whether we want the driver to quit at the end of our script. So I'm going to say if not debugging, then driver.quit. But if we are debugging, then it will not hit that statement. So now, if I run this, then we can see that now it opens up our browser and it stays open for us. So now we can see that it navigated to google.com. So keeping the browser open allows us to investigate the pages and find the elements that we need to find. So now let's navigate to the login of the utility page where I pay my bill so that I can show you how we can automatically fill out those forms and submit the payment. Now, since this is a real world example of a script that I actually use, I'm going to use the real local utility website and my actual credentials. But for obvious reasons, I'm going to hide a lot of this information so that people don't have my login and payment information. Now, I've done videos in the past on keeping sensitive information within environment variables and how that's useful. In this video, I'm going to be using the python.env package to help with this. And it'll make it super simple for hiding sensitive information and loading it into your scripts. And I actually just released a video on this recently. So let's see how this works. So first we need to install the package. So I'm going to close my browser here for now, open back my terminal, and this is pip install, and this is python-.env. Let's install that. And like I said, I just released a video on this, and I'll be sure to leave a link to that video in the description section below. So now that we have that installed, we'll want to create a dot file within our project that will hold our sensitive information. And this file will be called .env. Now, I've actually already created this file for myself, and it's just an empty file here. And within this file, we can put the information that we don't want to be visible from within our script. So let me write in a couple of values here so that we can see how this looks. So for example, I know the form will ask me for an account number and my last name. So if I were to add those to this .env file, it might look something like account number, and I meant to make this uppercase. And for now, let's just say this is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I can say last name is equal to Schafer. So you can see that there's no spaces and also no quotes around the numbers and strings or anything like that. So now I'm going to fill in all of the information that I know that I'm going to need for this script, and then we'll see how to load it into our script using the .env module. So I'm going to fast forward this a bit just as I insert my login and payment information and keep those private, but I'll pick right back up after I get all of those values typed in. Okay, so I added all of those credentials to the .env file that I'm going to need for this script. And now let's see how we can use the .env module to load those in. So first, to import what we need here, we need to import load.env from the .env module. So I'll say from .env import load underscore .env. And now all we need to do is run this method at the top of our script. So here underneath debugging, I'll just go ahead and run that load.env function. And what that's going to do is it's going to take everything that's in our .env file and turn it into an environment variable that we can access. Now, to access an environment variable, let's use the OS module. So here at the top, I'll just import OS. So for example, if I wanted to grab my account number, then what I could do is say account number is equal to os.getEnv, and then whatever we called this in that .env file. And I called this the same thing here. I just called it account number. And that's how we're going to be able to fetch all of that private information. Let me close down that .env file so I don't accidentally open it up. Now, I have a bunch of these that I'm going to need for this script. So instead of having you watch me type all these in manually, let me just skip ahead a bit after I grab all of these. Okay, so I've got all of the information that I added to my .env file. We can see here that I have the login page, the account number, the last name, then I have my card information here, my phone number, and then an app password. Now, the app password is something that I'm going to use to send an email later. Now, one thing that I want to point out is that I'm actually currently using an incorrect credit card number, and I'm doing that on purpose because I'd rather the payment fail on purpose while I'm testing and debugging instead of accidentally submitting a payment that could be incorrect. So once I feel comfortable with the script and I think that it everything should run smoothly, then I'll change this to my actual credit card number. Okay, so you can see that one of the things that I listed in my credentials here is the URL for the login page to the utility website. And again, since I'm using a real-world example, I'm going to keep the URL to this website hidden because a lot of small local utility websites like this are a bit outdated and aren't set up to handle a lot of traffic. If anyone wanted to look up this site, then I'm sure that plenty of you could easily find it, but I'm just going to leave it out of the code so that they don't get hammered too hard with a bunch of Python scripts from this tutorial. But with that said, let's replace google.com down here with my login to my local utility and see the information that I need to provide in order to automate this process. So I'm going to copy this login page here, and we will open that instead of Google. Now I'll save that and run it, and it opens up the website here, and I'm just going to scroll in a bit. Okay, and here we can see the web page and the information that I need to fill in order to find my account and how much I owe. Now, this will be different for every website and form that you fill in, but you'll need to find a way that we can find and select certain elements within a web page so that we can fill them out automatically. So to do this, we can inspect the elements within the browser and find if they have any identifying attributes. The best case scenario is if the element that we want to find has an ID, since those are supposed to be unique on a web page. So let's go ahead and do this for the account number and the last name, and we'll see if these have IDs. So I'm going to go to inspect to where we can look at the HTML for this. Now, I know that this is a little bit small here. Let me see if I can make this larger. I can. And now scroll down, and here is that account information, and we can see that that does have an ID of account, and down here is the name, and we can see that that has an ID of name. So that's good. Those web elements having those IDs makes it a lot easier for us to find and select those within our script. So now let's close this down and go back to our script, and now let's see how we can use Selenium to fill out the form values with these IDs. So first, let's see how we can get Selenium to actually find these elements. So to do this, we can use the driver's find element method. So above where we are testing for debugging for the quit there, I'm just going to say account input is equal to driver.find_element. And there are different ways that we can use this find element method to find elements on the page. First, we're going to need to tell it what we're looking for. In this case, we're looking for an ID. So to do this, we are going to need to import the by object from Selenium. So towards the top, I'll import this. So we can say from selenium.webdriver.common.by import by, by. And now down here at the bottom, within this find element method here, we can say driver.findElement and use that by object that we imported dot ID, and now pass in the ID of what we want to find, and that was account. So again, just a quick look at this. This is saying account input is equal to driver.findElement by ID account ID. Now, if I were to run this now, then we wouldn't really notice anything because right now it's only finding that element. To test if it's found it, let's put in a conditional and then add some text to that field. So I can say if account input, and that will tell us whether or not it found it. Then we can now send some keys to that text field. So I can say .send_keys, and for now let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now let me run this code, and if I run this, we can see that it opens up our website here, and within the account number, it automatically put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there for us. So now we actually have this doing some useful automation in our web browser. So now if I simply plug in my actual account number into the code instead of this sample account number, then it should fill that in correctly. But we can also see that this information isn't blurred out within the browser. Now, bear with me here. I'm writing a bit of additional code that I wouldn't be writing if I wasn't sharing this tutorial online for everybody to see. But some of these videos, or some of these fields, I don't want to be visible when shown in the browser. And I could just blur these out later on while editing the video, but just in case I miss anything, I'm going to go ahead and write a function here that blurs out the information here within this field. So what I'm going to do is set this to a password type. And whenever you set this to a password type, instead of being able to see the information that I've typed in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll just be a bunch of dots. Now, this might actually be useful for some of you if some of you need to be able to run some JavaScript while automating web browsing or something like that. So that's another reason that I wanted to add this in, is because changing the attributes of some elements with Selenium might be something that a lot of us find useful. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a function that executes some JavaScript code that gives these fields a password type, and that password will black out the text like I said. Now, I'm going to be using JavaScript because Selenium itself is designed more for interacting with web elements based on their existing state rather than altering the HTML directly. But I can have it execute some JavaScript for me that will do this. So let's create this function and we'll see how this is done. So I'm going to close this down, and now underneath debugging here at the top, let's create a function. Actually, let me put this below our constants here. So I'm going to create a new function here, and let's call this set field to password. And the arguments that this function is going to take is going to be driver, and then the element ID that we want to change. So now within here, all we have to do to execute this JavaScript is to say driver.execute underscore script. Oh, let me spell that right. Execute underscore script. And now the script that we want to execute. So this is going to be some very short and sweet JavaScript here. We're just going to say document.get element by ID. And then let's pass in that element ID from our parameters there. And now, once it gets that, then we can set the type of that equal to password. Whoops, and this is an F string here. I forgot to include this within braces. So let me put that in, and now we're not getting that warning anymore. Okay, so again, this is super simple. We just have this Python function here, takes in our driver, our element ID, driver.execute script, run some JavaScript here to grab that element with that ID and set the type equal to a password. So now let's run this before we set that account, or before we send those keys, and see if this hides those keys. And actually, I'll do this here within the conditional so that we're sure that it finds that. So I'll say set field to password, pass in our driver, and the ID that we want is account. So now, if I save this and run it, then we can see now that it actually did set this to a password field. So we can't actually see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's all just blurred out there. So now that'll help me in keeping my information private, and also hopefully it helped you learn something more about Selenium and how we can change around some of these fields or run a script. Now, normally I would clean this up a bit and do some error handling to make sure that there were no errors in the JavaScript code, but I just decided to add this on last second in order to keep that information hidden. So I'm just going to keep that nice and simple and keep it like it is. But we'll see what it looks like to catch some errors here in just a second. Okay, so now that we are setting that to a password, now let me put my real account number in there. So I'm going to grab this from my constants up here, and instead of sending in these dummy keys, we'll actually send in that account number. And now if you remember, all we need to do now is have Selenium fill in my last name and then submit the form in order to find my account. So for the last name, this is going to be the same thing that we did for the account number, except using the name ID. So I'm just going to copy this line here, and instead of account input, this is going to be name input, and instead of account ID, this is going to be name ID. And now since we're going to need both of those, in order to submit the information, I'll just add that to my conditional. So I'm going to say if account input and name input, because we're going to need both of those. And now I'll go ahead and set both of those to password fields. And we will send the keys to both of those as well. And this is going to be name input.send keys. And what we're going to want to send is my last name, which isn't much of a secret. I have it in my .env file anyway, but everybody already knows that if you're watching this video. Okay, so now let's run that and make sure that everything is still looking good. Okay, so we can see that it has the account number filled in, our last name filled in here. And now in order to submit this form, all we would need to do here is click this search button. And what this search button does is it actually submits that form to find my account. So we're going to want to be able to click on this. But first, we're going to want to see how Selenium can find this before it can click on it. Now, in this case, I want to show you how you can find something with Selenium that doesn't have an ID like we saw before. For example, let's inspect that element with our HTML, and we can see what this looks like. So let me inspect this, and let me make this larger so everyone can hopefully see. I'll make the entire thing larger here and blow this up. Okay, so we can see here that this is an input type equal to submit. The name is equal to submit, and the value is search, but there is no ID here. This other one has an ID of reset, but for some reason this one doesn't have an ID. So we don't have an ID to go off of. So if we want to do more advanced searches with Selenium, we can use something called XPath. Now, I don't know XPath very well myself, but it's a language used for navigating through XML, which is also applicable to HTML. So let me type in what I need to find the submit button here using XPath, and then I'll explain step by step exactly what it's doing. So I'm going to go back to my script here. And again, first let me type this out, and then I will explain what it's doing. So I'm going to say submit button is equal to driver.find_element. And now instead of by ID, it's going to be by XPath. And now for the XPath here, I will type this out and then explain exactly what this is doing. Okay, so let me explain what this XPath code is doing here. So this / here at the beginning tells it to look across the entire HTML document. And input right here, whoops, I didn't mean to move that around. Input says that the element being searched for is an input element. Now this entire part here, at type equals submit, is a condition that the input element must have an attribute type with the value of submit. And this typically identifies a submit button in a form. And then we have another conditional here with a name equal to submit. So now that should be all of the information that we were able to gather when we inspected that HTML. So now it should be able to find that submit button. Now, if it does, then let's have Selenium click on that button for us. So to do this, I can come down here and say if submit button, then submit button dot click. And it should be as simple as that. And by clicking on that button, if we typed in the correct credentials, then it should take us to the next page where we can enter our payment information. So let's see if this works so far. So I'm going to save that and run it. We can see it fills in our information and then immediately submits that form. And now we are here at the payment processing page. So we can see that that worked. We were taken to the next page with my account information and where I can submit a payment. So now that we're navigating to a new page, this actually brings up something that you might run into when using Selenium, and something that we're going to want to check for. So when we go to new pages, pages take time to load. And depending on how long they take to load, the elements that we're trying to find might not be loaded by the time our script searches for those elements, which could cause problems. So instead, let's refactor our code here a bit and add some Selenium code that will wait for elements to load before we search for them. So to do this, I'm going to close down our browser here and go back to our script. So to do this, we're going to need to make a couple of imports. So I'm going to come up here to the top, and we are going to say from selenium.webdriver.support import expected underscore conditions. So that's expected underscore conditions. And we'll just import that as EC so that we don't have to type that in every time. And now underneath here, I'll say from selenium.webdriver.support.ui import WebDriver wait. Oops, and we can see that we have an error here because I didn't spell conditions correctly. Let me correct that. Okay. And lastly, we're also going to import something to check for a timeout error here. So I'll say from selenium.common.exceptions import, and that's going to be timeout exception. And again, sorry that those jump around a bit whenever I save those. It's just sorting those imports, but we can see that we have the timeout exception imported right there. So now I'm going to create a new function that will wait for an element to be present before we try to locate it. And if it times out, then that means that the element never loaded on the page. So we'll call this function wait for element. So I'm going to go down below our set field to password function that we created here, and I will call this one wait underscore for element, and we're going to want to pass in several different arguments here. So we're going to want the driver, and then we're going to want the by conditional, which is the whether it's an ID or something like that. Then we're going to want an element identifier, and what this will be the name or how we're going to identify what's out there. So if it's by ID, then this would be account or last name or something like that. And now let's set a timeout equal to, we'll just say 5 for now. Now, if all of this is a bit confusing right now, just hold on, and this will all make sense once we look through this. So I'm going to put in a try except block here, and the except is going to be that timeout exception. And for now, I'll just put in a simple print statement where we say, make this an F string, timed out, waiting for, and then we will pass in that element identifier and just return none. Okay, so now within our try block here, we're going to use those expected conditions that we imported from Selenium to check for the presence of our element. And we can do this by saying, I'll just call this element present is equal to, and expected conditions, which we imported as EC. And the name of this method is presence of element and underscore located. So presence of element located, and all we need to pass in here is that by, and then our element identifier. So that will check for the presence of an element. So now we just want our driver to wait until that presence is detected before we try to find it and do anything with it. So to do this, oops, and real quick, we can see that we're getting an error here. Let me scroll over this and see. Oh, this is actually takes in a tuple and not those as individual elements there. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so like I was saying, now we just want to wait for our driver to wait until the presence is detected before we try to do anything with it. So to do this, I can simply just say web driver wait that we imported just a second ago, pass in the driver, and pass in the timeout dot until element underscore present. And that is what we just created there. So everything here within this try block will wait until the presence of an element is detected. If it times out, then it will throw a timeout exception and returns none. Now, if it doesn't throw an exception, then I'm just going to return what we had before, where we just grab that element using the find element method. So down here under the try except block, I'm just going to return, and that was driver dot find element, and we'll do by and then the element identifier, which we've already done down here. That's the same thing here, by ID account, except here we are using our parameters of the function instead. So now everywhere that we were simply just finding that element before, I'm going to replace this with the wait for element function. So let me come down here to where we were just finding these elements, and this is going to be wait for element. Now we also passed in the driver here, so let me add that. And for name input, we will do the same. So we can see here it's waiting for element, passing in the driver, that by conditional, and then the element identifier. And let's see, what else do we have there? Nothing. We just had a timeout that we can set, but I'm just going to leave that at 5. Oh, and let's not forget our submit button down here. So where we were finding that, we can do the same thing. We can wait for that submit button. I'm going to pass in the driver as well, by XPath, and then that XPath text there. And lastly, since we're already refactoring our code a bit here, let's also split what we currently have into functions, where each page that we navigate is a different function. That way, if we decide to write unit tests for this later, then it will allow us to pinpoint exactly where problems are occurring. So right here, where we are going to the login page, I'm just going to put all of this within a function. So I'll call this login to account, and we will take in a driver as an argument. And now all of this is going to remain the same, but we're just going to indent this to where it is within that function. And now let's create a main function that handles the overall flow of this script. And we'll add some exception handling here as well. So within our main function, so I'll just go down here and create a main function. And within here, this is where I will add all of these things here, starting from, let's say, the service. So now, within our main function here, we'll say, we'll create that service, create our Chrome options, create our driver. We will put our debugging statement in here as well. And actually, I'm going to put these Chrome options up here towards the top with our debugging here. Sorry, just need to move a couple of things around. We had one more thing here. Yep, script directory and the driver path we'll put up here. Okay. So just a little justification of what I'm doing here and an explanation. This is kind of personal preference, but I like to keep, my debugging here and loading the environment variables and the constants, script directory, things like that, all the options outside and towards the top, and then keep the main flow of the application down here where we can have our functions and then our main function here. So now let's add in just a little bit of exception handling. And this is going to be pretty generic. So all we're going to do here is we are going to try to use that login to account function here. And we'll pass in that driver. And then we'll have an exception. And this except is just going to be web driver exception as E. And let me spell that correctly. And now I'll just print out that this was a general error. So make this an F screen and say general WebDriver error. And then we will just pass in that error there. Now we always want this to be checked. So we will put this in our finally block, and we'll say finally if not debugging driver.quit. And lastly, let's do our if double underscore name is equal to double underscore main. Then we want to run that main function. Now we can see that this is getting underlined here, and that is because we have not imported this general WebDriver exception. So I'll come up here to where we were importing these exceptions, and instead of just timed out exceptions, we also want that one as well. So now we shouldn't have any errors in our script. Okay, so I know that we just did a lot here, but like I said at the beginning of the video, the concept of this video is basically showing how we can take a lot of topics that we've learned about in other videos and apply it to a real-world situation and using a script that I actually use in my day-to-day life. But what I will do is, for anything that I have done a video on in the past, I will leave a description to those videos in the description section below, or I'm sorry, a link to those videos in the description section below, so that you can view those if you don't understand anything that we're doing here. So for example, I have a video on exception handling. I have a video on if name equals main and what that does. So I'm just kind of combining all of this into one real world application here so that we can see how all this comes together. Okay, so we made a lot of changes there, just doing a little bit of refactoring. So now let me save this and run it and make sure that we're still getting to that payment page. And we are. That all looks good. So I'm going to close this down for now. Oh, and actually, let me go ahead and open that back up, and I'll show what we have left to do. So now that we're on this payment page, we're just about finished up here. So my utility company automatically puts the amount that I owe each month into this payment amount field here. Now all we have to do is do what we did before, where we search the page source for the IDs of the field elements that we want Selenium to fill out for the credit card information. And first, since we're on a new page, I'll split this up into a new function called submit payment, and we'll do all of that logic there. So over here underneath login to account, since we're on a new page here, I'm going to make a new function called submit payment. And let me go ahead and close down our Google Chrome here. You can see that we actually have several of these. So I'm going to close all these down. I might fast forward the video just a second. Okay, so now that we are on that new page, all we need to do is submit my payment information. Now, I'm going to go ahead and type everything out and just skip forward a little bit because this is not going to be anything new. Here, I'll go ahead and type one out just so we can see it. But this is basically going to be the same things that we've seen before. So we're going to wait for an element, pass in the driver, and I've already written down these IDs from the source just so that we can speed this up a bit. So the ID for the card number field is by ID, and this was going to be card number was the ID for that one. And there's also an input field for the card month, the card year, the CVV on the back, the payment amount, and things like that. So really quick, I'm going to go ahead and put in all this information. I'm going to skip forward just a bit. Okay, so I've fast forwarded here to where I've inserted all of this information. This looks like a lot, but it's nothing that we haven't seen before. So all I'm doing here is I'm waiting for these elements to load on the new page. We're waiting for the card number, and then we're getting the month input, the year input, the CVV input, the payment amount, the confirm checkbox, and the submit button. We're getting all of those. And then we're checking if all of those loaded and exist. So num input, month, year, CVV, confirm, submit. You can see that we left out the payment amount because that's for something else. And if all those exist there, then we want to send keys of the card number, the card month, the card year, and the CVV. So basically, this is just a lot of code here to fill out, find the elements of that field for us, and then to fill out that field for us. Now, like I said, you can also see that I grabbed the payment amount here. Now, I want to check this amount to make sure that there's actually a payment due. And I'll also add in a check to make sure that the payment isn't unusually high. So I've had an issue with this utility before where I was charged for something that I wasn't supposed to be charged for, and it was a very large amount. So if the amount is over a certain threshold, then I'll just have the script not submit the payment and send myself a message to check with them manually. So to do this, I'm just going to put in another conditional here and say if that payment amount exists, then let's try to get that as a string. So I'll say payment amount string is equal to payment amount, and we can use this get attribute method. And the attribute that we want is the value of that field because it's already filled out with the amount that I owe. So now I'm going to try to convert that to a float. And if it doesn't convert to a float, then I'll have it hit an exception. So I'll say try, and we'll just create a new value here called payment amount is equal to, and we're going to try to get a float of that payment amount string. And now we'll also check here if this float, if it is less than or equal to 0, because if it's less than or equal to 0, then there is no payment due. So I'll just return false. Also, I want to see if that amount due is excessively high. So I will also say, let's see here, if payment amount is greater than, let's say something like $300. I could also do some analysis here to where I see if it's above a certain standard deviation from the rolling average or something like that. I'm just going to keep it simple and say if it's over $300, which I consider a large amount for this utility, then I will also return false. And now we will throw an exception here. If it can't do any of this within here, we'll throw a value error and we'll just return false there as well. So all of this here will return false and break out of our function if anything seems off with the payment amount. But if it makes it through that code and everything looks good, then we can continue on with submitting our payment. So now that we've filled in all of these forms here and sent in our keys for all the card numbers, all that's left to do is to click this confirm checkbox and click the submit button. So we can come down here. Oh, and I actually want to be inside of this conditional here where it checked to make sure that those actually exist. And all I want to do here is, there's nothing fancy that we haven't seen here yet. I just want to run the click method on both the confirm checkbox and the submit button. And like we saw before when I looked up my account information, clicking the submit button will take us to a new page. And in this case, it's either going to take us to a page that our payment was successful or that the payment failed. Now, when you're writing scripts like this, you're going to tailor this to your own needs. We don't always get a nice, tidy way to know if something was a success or not. Sometimes we might have to simply check the page for a specific text to know whether our payment went through or not. Now, that's what we're going to need to do in this situation. So for example, I know that when a payment is successful, whenever I submit a payment to this website, it sends me to a page where the text, "Thank you for your payment," is visible. If you do something like this, then you'll need to either know what to look for to determine a success or determine whether something is a failure. But like I said, in this specific case, I know that it takes me to a page where it just has the text, "Thank you for your payment." So what I'm going to do after submitting my payment is use that same WebDriver wait function that we saw before to just wait a few seconds to see if that "thank you for your payment" text appears on the next page. So to do this, we don't actually have to navigate to that page because it's going to do it on its own. So I will just throw in a try here, and we're going to use that WebDriver wait that we saw before and pass in that driver and pass in a timeout, and we're going to wait until, and let me make this a couple of lines here. So we'll use that expected condition again that we imported as EC. And this has a method, this expected condition of text to be present underscore in element. It's a long one. So that's text to be present in element. And the text that we are going to be looking for here, first we have to pass in a tuple to find the element that we are looking for. So we're going to have a biconditional. And again, I'm just going to use XPath here. And for this XPath, I'm just going to look inside the entire body of the HTML. And within the body of the HTML, if I see that text, thank you for your payment, then I know that that payment was successful. So if that is successful, then I'm just going to come down here and return true. And if it's not successful, then we're going to then that's just going, if it doesn't see that text, thank you for your payment in the body of that HTML, then what it's going to do is it's going to throw this timeout exception. So we can handle this timeout exception here, and we'll just say print payment failed. And then instead of returning true, we're going to want to return false. So now I'll save that. So now that I have all this in place, it should work if we enter the correct credit card information. Like I said way earlier in the video, I currently have the incorrect card information in my credentials for now, so that we can check to make sure that this fails first. So let's run this submit payment function and then run the script to see what we get. So in order to run this function, let's see, that was called submit payment. So down here in our main function, first what we do here is log into the account, and then we can submit payment. Again, we need to pass in that driver. Now remember, we're returning true or false whether this payment was successful. So I'll just say payment success is equal to the return value of that function. If it returns true, then payment success will be true. If it's false, then it'll be false. So I can say if payment success, then I'll just print out here successful payment. And if it's not a success, then we'll have an else, and I will just copy that, paste it in, and say failed payment. Okay, so it's been a while since we've tested this here. Hopefully I don't have any typos or anything, but in order to know, let's just run this with my fake credit card credentials, and we'll see what it does. So it logs me in, tries to submit that payment. We can see here that the website's still open. It says, we're sorry, but we're currently unable to process your payment. If I go back here to the output, then we can see payment failed, failed payment. So that is failed payment there, and that is payment failed from the, so the first one here is from the timeout exception. The second one here is from our conditional if the payment was successful. Okay, so that is working as expected, even though it was a failure, because I have the incorrect credit card information. So we're getting extremely close here. So everything that we've done so far, we've navigated to find my account, we have automated the credit card information, and then we've submitted the payment. Now, everything has worked automatically so far, so we're doing this automation correctly, and it looks like if I was to set my credit card credentials to the correct credentials, then that would have worked. But one thing that I want to do before entering my correct credentials is I want to have a way to message myself each month and tell myself that this payment was attempted, if the payment was successful, and how much the amount was for. So I'm going to have this automatically send me an email and a text message with this information. So first of all, let's add some logging to our application so that we're keeping track of all the project of our script as we go, and then I can include that in my messages. So first, to do this, I'm going to import the logging module. Now, instead of actually keeping a log file for this script, I'm just going to have the log sent to me in an email. So instead of saving it to a file, I'm just going to have it write to a text stream. To do that, we're going to use the string IO class from the IO module. So I'm going to import that as well. So import IO. And now I'm going to format my logs here towards the top of the script. So we'll do that right here below debugging. So I'm going to create a log stream, like I said, instead of having this in a file. So I'm just going to use a string IO text string. And now I'm going to set the log format. And the log format I'm going to have as, and I'll explain this right after I get it typed out here. So in formatting logs, it's still common to use Python's old style string formatting. The %, message is a placeholder for the log message. So here I'm saying that I want the log message and no other information. So I don't want the time or the logging level or anything like that. I just want the messages here. So the way that I have it set up here is almost have it behave more like a print statement than anything else, except it'll keep all of them in one place and allow me to send them all at once. Now, after that, the S here indicates that the log message should be formatted as a string. So now, using both of those, I can say logging.basic config to set up our log here, and I'm going to set this up as a stream, and we will have that stream equal to log stream. I will set the level equal to logging.info, and for the format I'll set this equal to that log format that we created before. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the script here, and I'm going to add some logging statements. And I also want to replace any print statements that I currently have with logging. Now, since I'm mainly just replacing print statements here, I'll show you one replacement, and then I'll skip forward after I've replaced all the others, just to save us some time. So let's find one here. So we can see here where we have a print statement. So instead of having this as a print statement, let's just turn this to a logging statement. So I'll say logging.info, and we'll have that as a logging statement instead of a print statement. And that's basically all we have to do is add these logging.info anywhere that we want to save that information. And now I'm just going to go through the script, and I'm going to place these in a few other locations, but I'm going to fast forward just a bit as I place some of these around. Okay, so I went through and changed out my print statements with these logging.info statements. There are a couple of other additions that I made only with logging. I didn't add anything else, but just little things here and there, like up here, I'm logging the payment amount whenever we get to the payment screen. If the payment is less than 0, then I'm just saying exactly why this failed here. So logging that no payment was due, or that the payment amount was high, or that there was an invalid payment amount, like it was a string or something weird like that. But those are the only additions I made. It was just adding some logging statements to different parts of our script. Okay, so down here within our payment success, if it's true or false, this is where I'm going to have it send me an email and a text message telling me that it was either successful or it failed. So now that we have the logging set up, let's see exactly how we can do this by adding that functionality that will send me some emails and send me some text messages of these results, so that I can stay informed when this script runs and if there are any issues. Now, again, I've done a detailed video in the past on how to send emails using Python, and I'll be sure to put a link to that video in the description section below so that you can see the details of what I'm doing here. But I'm just going to do this fairly quickly here. So to do this, I'm going to make a couple of imports. So up here at the top, I'm going to say from email.message, we're going to want to import email message. And now I'm going to create a separate function to send this email. So I'll just go down here to the very bottom here, create a new function, and we'll call this send underscore message, since it's going to do emails and text messages. So first we're going to do a subject here, and then we're also going to want to send in a receiver. So for the sender, I'm just going to send this from myself. So this is going to be corey.m.schafer@gmail.com is my email address. And now let's create our message. So first of all, we're going to set this equal to that email message object that we imported. And now we're going to set a couple of things for this message. So first, we're going to have a from value. We're going to set that equal to the sender. Then we are going to have a to value. We're going to set that equal to the receiver. Then we're going to have a subject, and that subject we will set equal to the subject here that we're passing into the function. And now message.set underscore content, whoops, and this needs to be message, spelled that incorrectly. So this is going to be the content of the message. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to dump everything from our log stream. So I'm just going to say logstream.getValue. And since I've added all this logging throughout the script, that should be all the information that I will need to know exactly what happened, or at least enough to go off of in order to investigate whenever I get the email message. Okay, so now let's go ahead and send this. So I'll say with smtp lib. Oh, and actually, as I'm typing that out, I'm realizing that I didn't import that. So let's be sure to import smtp lib. Okay, now let's go back down here. And where are we at? Here we are. So with smtp lib dot smtp underscore ssl, again, I have videos on exactly what we're doing here. But right now we're just connecting to the server that we can use to send messages, and the ports and all of that. We're going to have that as an SMTP connection. And now I'm going to log in. So I'm going to log in with my email address, corey.m.schafer@gmail.com, and that is just the sender. And I'm also going to need my app password. Now, remember, this is pulled in from my .env file that we saw here at the very beginning. So I'm using my login information here for my email. You would have to do different. Okay, so now we can just use smtp.send underscore message with the message that we created. Oops, and I accidentally have a colon there that I don't want. And there we go. And let's see, I'm getting an error there. Did I not spell that correctly? Nope, I did not. SMTP lib. And now, if I go back down here, then that is good. So now that we have this send message function, this is what I'm going to use if the payment either fails or succeeds. So I'm going to go down to our main function and add this in. So within our payment success here, we can send a message. Actually, let me just create a message here equal to successful payment. And I will pass this in as the logging info. I will also pass that in as the subjects for the email, and the receiver of this email. I'm sending it from myself, but I also want myself to receive it. And we're going to do the same thing here. If the payment was a failure, but instead of a successful payment, we will do failed payment, pass in that message as our logging message, and then we will send that message to my email. Okay, so that should send me an email with the results of this script. But since this involves a payment, I kind of also want this texted to me when the script is run. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of phone numbers actually have an email address associated with them that will send a text message to the number when you send a message to that email address. Now, this depends on your cell phone provider, but most of the major ones have email gateways available for the numbers. So for example, let me open up my browser here. I actually have this open up here in the browser. So for example, I have AT&T. If I wanted to send a text message to myself, I could just put in my phone number at mms.att.net. And in the description section below, I'll add a link to this page that has these gateways listed for a lot of the providers. Now, I don't know if this works internationally. I know that it works here in the United States, but this is just something that I use a lot because it's an easy, free version to send myself text notifications through Python. But if you're at all interested, then I can also show some paid versions in the near future, using things like Twilio and services like that to send text messages. So let me know if that's something that you all would be interested in. But for this video, I'm going to use this simple, easy paid route of just sending this to my phone number email address, and that's actually going to text me. And this is why I like this method so much, because it makes it so easy. So in order to do this, all I have to do is send another message here, but instead of at gmail.com, like I said, this is at mms.att.net for my specific network for AT&T. And what I need to do here is all I need to do, this is going to be an F string, all I need to do is come up here and put in my phone number in front of that email address. And what that will do is it will send me a text message. So I will save that. Now, I'm also going to have this send me an email if it runs into this general WebDriver exception here. So I'm just going to save these, and down here for the message, I'm just going to have, let's say, failed to run script. This is a bit more general here. That would probably mean that, something is wrong with the WebDriver or something like that. Okay, so very last thing here, down here at the bottom, if I have debugging turned on, then it likely means that I'm sitting here at my computer working on this script. So I'm going to change this so that it prints out our log stream so that I can see it there if we're debugging. So I'm going to change this to say if debugging, then what I want to do here is I just want to print out my log stream. So that was logstream.getValue. And then we'll say else driver.quit. Okay, so that's it. I'm not going to write any more code, I promise. I think we're done here. But let's make sure all this works. So we added a lot of different code here. So first of all, I'm going to run this script one more time with my incorrect credentials to make sure that this is working as expected and that I get my text message and my email. So I'm going to run this, and it goes through everything here. Let me close this down. Okay, so we can see here that since we have debugging turned on, that it printed out this log stream here of get value. And so it's saying the payment amount of $43.38 failed payment. Now, tutorial's getting a little long already, so I'm not going to show myself logging in to my email and showing you that those came through, but I'm looking at my phone right now, and I can confirm that I did just receive that email that said that the payment failed, and I also received a text message that the payment was attempted and that it failed with the incorrect credentials. So now to wrap all this up, let me put in the correct credentials, and then I'll turn off debugging so that it runs the browser in headless mode, which means that it doesn't even actually open the browser user interface to navigate to do everything that it needs to do. It just does it all in the background. So let me make those changes. So first, I'm going to set debugging to false. So that was up here at the top. Set that equal to false. And really quick, I'm going to open up my .env file here and set this to my correct credit card information. And I'll just fast forward to when that's done. Okay, so I just changed all of that around to where it should be my correct credit card information. So now the moment of truth. So I should be able to run this script and have it pay my bill automatically. Hopefully I didn't make any typing mistakes or anything like that, and I hope it all works. But if it doesn't, then I should get an email and a text telling me exactly what happened. But let me go ahead and run this. And again, it's going to run in headless mode, so I'm not going to get any output here. I'm only going to get a text message and I'm only going to get an email. Okay, so I did just get those, and I'll go ahead and put the email that I received on the screen now so that we all have some sense of accomplishment instead of just staring here at a blank screen, so you can see that it actually did go through. And I also paused the video and took a second to check the utility company website. And I did see that the payment went through in the amount that they expected as well. So that all did work exactly how we wanted it to work. So now the script is working as intended. All there is to do now is to schedule this in some way to run however often that we want this to run. So I'm going to set this up as a cron job on my system to run once a month. I still need to check with the utility company to figure out exactly when they put the payment due amounts on the website. But once I get that information, I'll just have this run automatically once a month to pay my bills for me. And if you want to see how to run cron jobs on a certain schedule, then I do have a video on that as well. That's for Mac and Linux. I know that Windows has the ability to run a bash shell now, but I'm not sure if cron tab is included in that or not. If you know, let me know in the comments below. But if you're on a Windows machine and that's not available to you, then I'm sure that they have their own schedulers as well. I just don't know much about Windows schedulers for running scripts on a certain time frame. But if anyone's interested, then let me know, and I can look more into that to show exactly how to run scheduled jobs on Windows, and I can put something together. Now, as for this script, I think it would be a great script to use in an advanced unit testing video that I'll be putting together in the near future, because this script has a lot of more advanced concepts that can be difficult for people who are new to unit testing to know exactly how to test. So for example, since we're going out to websites and sending emails and things like that, those are things that we want to mock in our unit tests so that we're not relying on things outside of our control that can break our script. So showing how to mock these calls and test this appropriately would be a good addition to the unit testing tutorial that we already have out there. But with that said, I think that's going to do it for this video. I know that this was a long one, but hopefully you found this walkthrough helpful. I know I didn't go as in-depth as I normally do when focusing on a certain topic, but I wanted to show how we can take a lot of these individual concepts that we've talked about before, combine them all into something useful that perhaps you can use to solve a similar problem that you may have. Like I said, I hate paying bills manually, so having it do this for me automatically and send me updates is a huge help for me. So I'd like to continue doing videos of scripts like this that I've created for myself in real-world situations. One that I'm almost done with is a financial hub that I've created for myself where I parse my PDF bank statements, and I created a tkinter GUI to categorize those transactions and then use pandas to visualize and analyze my spending habits. That's a pretty large project that I've been working on, and once it's all done, I'll release several videos covering how to do everything that I did for that. So be on the lookout for that. But if anyone has any questions about what we covered in this video, then feel free to ask in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer those. And if you enjoy these tutorials and would like to support them, then there are several ways you can do that. The easiest way is to simply like the video and give it a thumbs up. And also, it's a huge help to share these videos with anyone who you think would find them useful. And if you have the means, you can contribute through Patreon or YouTube, and there are links to those pages in the description section below. Be sure to subscribe for future videos, and thank you all for watching.